step back into a time before mammals, before dinosaurs, before flowers had even bloomed. The Carboniferous forests stretched endlessly across the equator, rising into green cathedrals where the air was thick with mist and oxygen. Giant ferns and towering club mosses grew like pillars, dripping with moisture, their trunks cloaked in vines and fungus. Sunlight filtered down in broken shafts, catching clouds of steam that rose from the swampy ground. And within this heavy air, life grew to monstrous proportions. Dragonflies as wide as hawks roared through the canopy, their wings flashing like blades of glass. Millipedes longer than men crawled across the litter of fallen leaves, moving like armored trains. Amphibians with crocodile jaws lurked in pools, their eyes glinting just above the water's surface. It was a world swollen by abundance, a world where oxygen itself was fuel for giants. But hidden in the shadows of these forests was another ruler, one more alien and unnerving than any dragonfly or amphibian. Crawling across the damp floor came scorpions, yet not the small, skittering predators we know today. These were giants, Pulmonoscorpius, the terror of the Carboniferous, stretched nearly a meter in length. Its pincers were the size of a human hand. Its armored plates gleamed like wet stone, and its tail, arched high, ending in a venomous stinger, sharp enough to pierce the soft flesh of any creature that dared cross its path. Imagine walking through this forest barefoot, your torchlight sweeping the undergrowth, and seeing that armored shadow emerge. Every instinct would scream to run, because in this world, even the invertebrates were monsters. To the smaller animals of the Carboniferous, Pulmonoscorpius was less a predator and more a force of nature. Amphibians the size of dogs scattered before it. Insects vanished into the moss. Its claws snapped like steel traps. Its legs scraped rhythmically against the mud, and its armored body glistened as if carved from obsidian. It was not fast, not graceful, but it was inevitable. When Pulmonoscorpius advanced, the forest bent to its presence. Its bulk turned the swamp floor into its hunting ground, and its sting made even larger rivals hesitate. The strangest thing is how familiar yet alien it feels. We know the shape of a scorpion. We fear its sting even today. But scaled to a size larger than a man's arm, that shape becomes something monstrous. And Pulmonoscorpius is proof that Earth's past was stranger, darker, and more terrifying than any myth. It did not need fire to inspire dread. It was dread made flesh, an armored shadow in a forest already thick with giants. The Carboniferous world was built for creatures like this. With oxygen levels at 35%, far higher than the 21% we breathe today, the rules of size were different. Invertebrates could grow beyond the limits of modern biology, fueled by an atmosphere that allowed lungs without lungs, breathing without breath. Pulmonoscorpius thrived in this alien air, its very existence a product of conditions we can scarcely imagine. When we look at its fossils, we are not just seeing a scorpion. We are seeing the evidence of a planet that once played by different rules. And so the legend of the giant scorpion lingers, not because it was the biggest predator of all time, but because it blurs the line between the familiar and the impossible. We know scorpions. We fear them. Yet here, magnified by oxygen and time, that fear becomes myth, made real. Pulmonoscorpius was both a predator and a symbol of a world where evolution dared to build monsters from the smallest shapes. Its reign ended with the forests that gave it life, but its shadow still crawls across our imagination. Welcome to Ancient Beast Behavior. Tonight, we enter the age of Pulmonoscorpius, the scorpion that walked like a monster through forests taller than skyscrapers. Pulmonoscorpius did not crawl alone. The Carboniferous forests were alive with the sound of legs, wings, and jaws, a chorus of survival where every step stirred something from the undergrowth. Picture the swamp floor at dusk, steam rising from black pools, fungi glowing faintly in the shadows, the hum of giant dragonflies echoing overhead. Then, From beneath a rotting log, the armored scorpion slides into view. Its claws open and close with a slow, deliberate snap, like the testing of a trap. Its eyes, small but glinting, scan the ground. With each scrape of its legs, the forest seems to tense, as if holding its breath. Unlike the fast, darting predators of today, Pulmonoscorpius did not need speed. Its power was in inevitability. A smaller amphibian, no bigger than a cat, freezes as the shadow passes overhead. It tries to slip into the water, but the giant scorpion is already there, claws snapping, tail raised. Whether Pulmonoscorpius was truly venomous we cannot say, but the stinger itself, curved and sharp, was enough to kill through fear alone. Imagine the strike, a swift arc of the tail, a puncture, and then silence. In the Carboniferous, death often came not with a roar, but with a whisper of armor in the dark. The ground itself recorded their presence. Fossil trackways, pressed into mud that hardened into stone, reveal the slow, steady march of these giants. Deep impressions where claws bit the earth show the weight they carried, trails so wide a child could lie down within them. Some run parallel, hinting that more than one Pulmonoscorpius walked together, perhaps drawn to the same feeding grounds. Was it coincidence, or a glimpse of a hunting pattern long forgotten? We may never know, but the image lingers. Giant scorpions, their armor glinting under filtered sunlight, moving side by side through a forest of giants. Their bodies were unlike anything we know today. Imagine a carapace not small and smooth, like a modern scorpion, but broad and ridged, built to protect organs that demanded moisture and weight. Their lungs, if we may call them that, were book lungs, stacked sheets of tissue folded like pages, pulling oxygen directly from the heavy air. In an atmosphere rich with life's breath, these lungs allowed an invertebrate to grow to lengths that defy the rules of our world. The forest itself breathed them into existence, and in return, they became its hunters. To walk among these giants would have been to step into a nightmare. Not because they were demons, but because they were real. Every log might conceal a predator with claws as wide as your hand. Every pool might echo with the ripple of armored legs. And in that world, humans, had we been there, would not have been the hunters. We would have been prey, watching the forest floor not for snakes or wolves, but for the gleam of a stinger in the dim light. And yet, Pulmonoscorpius was not invincible. Its size was both weapon and weakness. To remain alive, it needed the swamp, the moisture, the shade, the endless supply of prey and decay. The air that gave it life was its cage. If the forest dried, if the oxygen fell, the giant scorpion would falter. And that, eventually, is what happened. The world changed, the balance tipped, and the reign of giants ended. But for millions of years, Pulmonoscorpius was proof of evolution's boldest experiments. A scorpion, stretched beyond reason, walking like a monster in a world where monsters were real. The forest floor was never still. Beneath the towering ferns and moss pillars, life writhed in every corner. Millipedes thicker than a man's arm coiled under rotting bark. Beetles, the size of fists, scuttled through the leaf litter. And amphibians, half fish, half reptile, lurched clumsily from pool to pool. In this crowded, restless world, Pulmonoscorpius carved out its domain. It was not the fastest, nor the most agile, but it was relentless. Its armor gave it confidence to walk openly where softer-bodied creatures hid. Its claws, sharpened by evolution, made it both hunter and scavenger, able to seize whatever the swamp offered. Every movement left a mark. The scrape of its pincers across the ground disturbed insects that fled in panic. Amphibians, sensing the vibrations of its legs, slipped silently into black water to avoid detection. Even creatures too large to fear direct attack adjusted their path when Pulmonoscorpius advanced, for it was not wise to share ground with a monster that claimed the earth as its own. In this way, the giant scorpion shaped the behavior of everything around it, a silent enforcer of space in the Carboniferous jungle. Its presence even altered the forest itself. When it dragged its armored body across the damp floor, it left shallow furrows in the mud, creating tiny channels where water pooled and fungi grew. When it crushed vegetation beneath its weight, it cleared paths that smaller animals would later use. And when it molted, shedding the vast brittle plates of its exoskeleton, those cast-off shells became shelters for beetles, worms, and juvenile amphibians. Pulmonoscorpius was not just a predator, it was an architect, its very existence reshaping the environment it lived in. But even giants faced rivals. In the swamp pools lurked Anthracosaurus, a predator nearly 4 meters long, with jaws wide enough to seize anything that wandered too close. In the canopy above, Meganeura, the hawk-sized dragonfly, hunted smaller creatures in the air, and when it swooped, even scorpions gave pause. Pulmonoscorpius ruled the ground, but the Carboniferous was no single-throne kingdom. It was a web of monsters, each one powerful, each one vulnerable in its own way, and yet nothing carried the same aura of unease as the giant scorpion. The dragonfly dazzled, the amphibians lunged with brute force, but Pulmonoscorpius unsettled. Its slow, deliberate march, the gleam of its claws, the poised curve of its tail, all combined into a presence that felt like inevitability. You could fight an amphibian, outrun a dragonfly, perhaps even drive away a millipede. But the scorpion, it carried the weight of inevitability, as if the earth itself had chosen to crawl. For millions of years, this was its world. From Scotland to North America, the great swamps were its hunting grounds, and in every patch of leaf litter and moss, the thought of Pulmonoscorpius haunted smaller lives. It was the echo in the soil, the shadow in the mist, the claw in the darkness. And as long as the forests remained wet and the air remained thick with oxygen, the giant scorpions endured, thriving in the strange paradise of abundance and fear. Night in the Carboniferous was no quieter than day. As darkness fell, the mist thickened, the air pressed heavy against the swamp, and the forests came alive with sound. The booming croak of giant amphibians echoed across the pools. The thunder of dragonfly wings beat above the canopy, hunting in the starlight. And on the ground, the scrape of armored legs told of Pulmonoscorpius leaving its shelter, moving once more into the litter of damp leaves and rotting wood. Its body gleamed in the faint glow of fungi, its claws clacking softly, announcing its presence long before it could be seen. To imagine following it is to imagine fear itself. Step after step, it probes the ground, antennae sweeping forward like cautious hands, sensing vibrations, searching for prey. A beetle, too slow to notice, is seized in an instant, crushed between its pincers with a snap like breaking twigs. A smaller scorpion, one of its own kind but only a fraction of its size, retreats into the soil, knowing the giant does not share. Pulmonoscorpius moves steadily, never rushing, never wavering. It does not need to. In this forest, size is enough. The rhythm of its march is hypnotic. Hundreds of tiny claws bite the mud, pulling the body forward with the precision of a machine. Each segment shifts, each plate ripples, each claw scratches, an orchestra of inevitability, and as it moves, other creatures scatter. To the amphibians, it is a rival. To the insects, it is a predator. To the forest, it is the weight that presses the ground into shape. But even in this age of giants, time was not kind. Slowly, invisibly, the world began to change. The endless swamps that had fed these monsters started to dry. Forests shrank, peat bogs collapsed, and where once there was water, there came drought. The air itself shifted, oxygen falling from its great peak of 35% down toward the levels we breathe today. What had once been a gift became a curse. The lungs of Pulmonoscorpius, built for abundance, struggled in scarcity. Its massive body, once a symbol of strength, became a burden too heavy for a thinner world to bear. As the swamps withdrew, reptiles crept forward. Small at first, quick, egg layers that could survive far from the pools and the moss. Their scales kept them from drying. Their eggs freed them from water, and they spread across the forests with ease. Pulmonoscorpius remained tied to damp earth, bound by its size, its armor, its hunger. What had once made it master now made it fragile. And so, step by step, its kingdom shrank. But in its time, it was a ruler without crown or roar, but with silence, shadow, and inevitability. It walked where it wanted. It fed on what it pleased. It bent the forest to its will simply by moving through it. And though it has been gone for hundreds of millions of years, the tracks it left in stone still tell its story. The story of the scorpion that once walked like a monster through forests taller than skyscrapers. The fossils whisper of its passing, but never shout. What remains are fragments, pieces of armor pressed flat by stone, impressions in ancient mud where claws once gripped the earth. In Scotland, in Germany, in the cold, rich valleys of the ancient world, slabs of rock still bear the tracks of Pulmonoscorpius. Long, deliberate pathways, each step etched deep into the soil of a vanished swamp. Some are so wide you could stretch your arms and still not touch both edges. Standing before them, it is easy to feel small, to feel as though something vast has only just left the stage. Scientists can only guess at its full form. No complete head has ever been found. We do not know exactly what its eyes looked like, or how its jaws worked. Did it see in shadow, catching the faintest flicker of movement in the undergrowth? Did it crush its prey with brute strength, or pierce it with venom? The answers are gone, hidden in stone, leaving us with only speculation. And in that silence lies its power. For imagination fills the gaps that fossils cannot. And what the imagination sees in the dark is often far more terrifying than the truth. Perhaps that is why Pulmonoscorpius holds us even now. We do not recoil at the thought of a giant amphibian, nor marvel quite so much at a dragonfly with a 6-foot wingspan. But a scorpion, a creature we know today, one we still fear in deserts and jungles, scaled to monstrous size, armored and relentless, strikes at something primal. It reminds us that the shapes of our nightmares are not inventions, but memories of what once lived. And so, Pulmonoscorpius lingers in the edges of culture. In documentaries, it crawls across the misty forest floor, its stinger gleaming like a blade. In art, it is cast as demon, guardian, or monster, painted against glowing fungi and towering trees. In imagination, it becomes larger still, exaggerated into a creature beyond fact, closer to myth. But the truth, what little we know, is stranger than any embellishment. A real scorpion, the size of a dog, walking across the forests of the Carboniferous, armored in plates and carrying fear with every step. Its end came quietly. No great catastrophe, no sudden extinction, just the slow thinning of air, the steady drying of swamps, the rise of creatures more adaptable, more prepared for a changing world. Pulmonoscorpius, once a terror of the forest floor, faded into history. Its armor rotted, its claws broke, its body vanished into soil. All that remained were the scars it left in the mud, scars that hardened into stone and waited 300 million years to be found. And when those scars were discovered, we were reminded of something humbling. The earth has always been stranger than we imagine. Its forests have held monsters. Its skies have carried dragons. Its swamps have crawled with armored shadows. We are not the first to walk here. We are only the latest chapter in a book filled with giants, each one greater and stranger than the last. And yet, even as Pulmonoscorpius vanished, its echo never truly left. Evolution carried forward fragments of its story into the creatures we know today. Every scorpion that creeps beneath a rock, every arachnid that raises its pincers in warning, is a faint reflection of the giant that once ruled the Carboniferous. They are smaller now, constrained by the thinness of modern air, but the shape, the rhythm, the menace remain the same. When you see a scorpion lift its stinger, you are watching a gesture older than trees, older than reptiles, older than flowers. It is a movement born in the swamps of a forgotten age. Imagine walking through one of those ancient forests. The air so rich with oxygen it almost burns in your lungs. The ground is spongy beneath your feet, the trunks of giant ferns rising higher than any building you've seen. The buzzing of dragonflies fills the canopy above, and frogs the size of hounds splash into murky pools at your approach. Then the sound comes, a scrape, a rhythm of armored claws moving against wet earth. You stop. You know before you even see it that something massive is crawling nearby. A shadow moves between the trees, low to the ground, and then the body emerges, plated, jointed, relentless. The stinger arches over its back like a drawn spear. Pulmonoscorpius has arrived, and suddenly you are no longer at the top of this food chain. This is the reality of prehistory, a world where giants roamed not only the seas or the skies, but the ground beneath our feet. The monsters of the Carboniferous did not roar. They scraped, clicked, and hissed. They were not made of bone, but of armor. And perhaps that is why they unsettle us so deeply. They are not the majestic dinosaurs we imagine as lords of the earth. They are closer, stranger, more alien. They are reminders that evolution builds terrors from the smallest of forms, magnifying them until the ordinary becomes the unthinkable. And that is the story Pulmonoscorpius leaves us with. It is not just a fossil, not just a track pressed into ancient mud. It is a window into possibility. It shows us what the Earth once allowed, and what it may one day allow again. For if climate shifts gave rise to giants once, who can say they will not again? The future is as wide and strange as the past, and somewhere in its depths may crawl monsters that echo the scorpions that once ruled forests, taller than skyscrapers. Pulmonoscorpius was not alone in its dominion. The Carboniferous world was filled with giants of all kinds, creatures that seem impossible to us now. Dragonflies the size of hawks ruled the skies, their buzzing wings rattling the leaves as they hunted smaller insects. Millipedes longer than a man's height carved living highways across the forest floor, their hundreds of legs scratching a rhythm that never ceased. Amphibians stretched into forms larger than crocodiles, lurking in shallow swamps and rivers, waiting for any animal bold enough or foolish enough to step too close to the water's edge. It was a world where gigantism was not rare, but expected. And yet, the giant scorpions were among the most terrifying of all, not because they were the largest, but because they were predators, perfectly adapted to their strange, humid empire. Their armor made them living tanks, their pincers powerful enough to crush, their stingers sharp enough to pierce. To the small reptiles that had just begun to emerge, to the early amphibians that hopped and crawled between pools, Pulmonoscorpius was not merely a threat. It was the shadow of death itself. Its movement across the forest was slow, deliberate, but unstoppable. When it struck, it was with a certainty that spoke of millions of years of refinement. Even their very breathing tied them to this alien atmosphere. The name Pulmonoscorpius means lung scorpion, a nod to its unique internal structures that suggest it may have been one of the first arachnids to conquer land with something resembling lungs. But those lungs required the thick, oxygen-rich air of the Carboniferous. In today's thinner atmosphere, such a creature could not survive. It was as if the earth itself built the giant scorpions, sustained them for millions of years, and then quietly reclaimed them when the balance shifted. What is most unsettling about Pulmonoscorpius is how familiar it remains. Unlike dinosaurs, whose shapes are so distant from our daily lives, the form of a scorpion has not changed much in hundreds of millions of years. The body, the pincers, the stinger, they are all recognizable, still crawling across deserts and forests today. Only the scale has shrunk. That means when we look at a modern scorpion, we are not looking at something completely alien. We are looking at a survivor, a descendant of giants, a creature whose ancestors once towered over the shadows of trees taller than skyscrapers. And so the giant scorpions haunt our imagination not only because they were real, but because they remind us of what still exists. They are a reminder that evolution does not always discard its designs. It simply reshapes them, scales them down, or adapts them to new worlds. Pulmonoscorpius may be gone, but its echo lives in every sting delivered in the deserts of today, in every armored crawler that waits under a stone. To know their story is to feel the thin boundary between past and present, between the monsters that were and the creatures that remain. Dusk sinks over the swamp, and the forest exhales. Steam unfurls from black pools, spores drift like pale dust, and the ground begins to move. Pulmonoscorpius lifts itself from the shelter of a rotting log, plates beaded with moisture, antennae tasting the tremor of distant footsteps. The rhythm of its legs starts up again, a slow scrape-scrape that turns leaf litter into drumskin. A ripple of water betrays a salamander-sized amphibian edging between roots. The scorpion halts, claws open, tail hovering like a poised question mark. Vibration tells the story long before sight does. When the claws snap, the answer is final. Sometimes the sting comes first, a precise arcing strike that seems to erase space. Sometimes the pincers do all the work, crushing with patient pressure until thrashing becomes stillness. Either way, the forest swallows the sound, and only ripples remain. Higher in the canopy, a hawk-sized dragonfly stalls mid-flight, glassy wings churning humid air. It dives on a different prize, seizing a shrieking insect in a cage of legs and jaws. Predators pass each other like storm fronts here, each wrapped in its own weather. Across the floor, a living train, Arthropleura, rattles the mulch with 100 synchronized steps. It is too large to fear the scorpion and too armored to tempt it. They share the world like neighboring gods, one of hunger, one of endless appetite for rot. Near a sinkhole pool, the water bulges, and a crocodile-headed amphibian breaks the surface. Pulmonoscorpius pauses, tail lifted, wary of jaws that own the edge of every pond. The stalemate lasts a breath, then two, and the scorpion chooses shadow over spectacle. Its molting places are landmarks, shallow bowls of peeled armor where younger lives take shelter. Tiny reptiles tucked beneath curved plates like monks beneath cloisters of bone. The scorpion leaves behind houses the way trees leave hollows, without intention, with consequence. Night deepens, and the fungus glows faintly, a galaxy scattered in damp wood. The scorpion moves through that starfield as if charting it, antennae writing invisible lines. Every step is a calculation: moisture, cover, pulse, reward. When drought comes, the forest's voice goes hoarse. Pools shrink to mirrors, peat cracks, and the air thins by imperceptible degrees. Strength turns into weight. Size becomes a promise the world can no longer keep. Reptiles multiply in the margins like new ideas. Scaled, quick, and unthirsty for swamps, they step onto paths the scorpions cannot follow. The empire of wet places becomes a chain of prisons, each island smaller than the last. Still, for a long time, the old order lingers where fog refuses to surrender. Here, Pulmonoscorpius rules by patience, by pressure, by certainty of form. Here, the floor remembers every footprint, and the leaves keep their secrets. Then the air slips another measure. The green cathedrals grow patchy, the choir quiets. What ends a giant is rarely a blow, more often a subtraction. Less air, less water, fewer nights where hunger and opportunity meet. What remains is written in stone because nothing else could hold it. Broad trackways, claw pits, the slight furrow of a dragging plate along the margin. You can place your fingers into those dimples and feel a rhythm older than trees with fruit. Look long enough, and you'll see the present reflected in that rhythm. A modern scorpion lifts its tail in a gesture that predates flowers, birdsong, and mammal fur. The shape is smaller now, but the sentence is the same, spoken in chitin and shadow. Imagine returning to that forest one last time, breath burning with oxygen, sweet as syrup. You kneel at the edge of a pool and watch the surface hold its breath. Somewhere behind you, armor scrapes and the stinger writes a crescent in the air. You stand not as master but as witness to a rule written by chemistry and weather, to a monarch crowned in silence whose scepter was inevitability, to a world that proves terror doesn't need teeth like knives when it has patience and weight. Pulmonoscorpius passes, and the pool unknots its reflection. The forest inhales again, deeper this time, as if practicing thinner futures. And when the giant is gone, the hush it leaves is not emptiness, but echo. Echo in every fossil track that looks like a staff of music abandoned mid-song. Echo in every desert scorpion that still carries the choreography of ancestors. Echo in us, who fear what crawls, because our lineage remembers when crawling ruled. So we listen to stone, to silence, to the scrape that no longer sounds. We listen and learn that giants end not by failure, but by the world turning a page. And we turn with it, holding the memory of a sting that once bent forests to its will. But memory is never still. It moves the way the forest once moved, breathing through us in fragments. When paleontologists lift a slab of sandstone and find the tracks of Pulmonoscorpius pressed deep into the grain, it is not just science, it is resurrection. For a heartbeat, the Carboniferous exhales again, and we walk beside the monster as if time were thin glass. The prints are wide, far wider than any scorpion alive today, each claw sinking with the weight of an armored titan. The stride is steady, unhurried, the rhythm of inevitability rather than chase. In those parallel rows, in that deliberate spacing, we see not just a creature, but a certainty of presence. Museums mount these slabs like scripture, lights angled so shadows stretch the grooves into motion. Children stare, wide-eyed, while adults cross arms and try to imagine scale, with bodies that feel suddenly small. The echo of claws on mud is louder in imagination than any speaker could play. Reconstructed models tower under glass domes, armor ridged like iron, tails raised like spears. Artists paint scenes of mist and shadow, forests lit by shafts of green light, scorpions crawling like myths. Every rendering is a bridge between silence and story, between fossils and fear. And in popular culture, the giant scorpions become monsters once more. Films exaggerate their size, games turn them into armored demons, books cast them as guardians of forbidden worlds. Accuracy bends, but awe remains, because even the truth was already terrifying. The irony is sharp. Pulmonoscorpius may not have been the ruthless hunter we imagine. Its sting, though formidable, may not have been venomous at all. It could have been a scavenger, a giant janitor of forests, more feared for its bulk than its hunger. But myths prefer predators, and so we crown it with dread. We give it the role of executioner when it may have been architect, recycler, survivor. The truth hides in absence, and imagination fills the gaps with claws. Yet perhaps that is fitting. Perhaps what we fear in Pulmonoscorpius is not only its size, but its closeness, because the scorpions of today still crawl, still sting, still remind us the line between giant and small is only circumstance. When we lift a stone and see a flash of armor, our hearts quicken, not because of danger alone, but because we remember. We remember forests that breathed thicker air, skies darker with wings, ground alive with armored kings. We remember, though we never lived it, because the shape still lives beside us. Pulmonoscorpius lingers not as a monster of size, but as proof that scale is temporary. What was once enormous can become small. What is small may, under different skies, grow again. The world decides and life obeys, and giants rise and fall like tides we cannot stop. So when we speak its name, Pulmonoscorpius, we are not naming an extinction. We are naming a possibility, a lesson carved in chitin and stone. We are naming the weight of patience, the rule of atmosphere, the fragility of giants. And in that name, whispered through museums, books, and stories, the scorpion still walks, not on the forest floor of the Carboniferous, but in the imagination of every human who wonders what waits beneath the next shadow. And that perhaps is the truest kind of survival. Then the story circles back to where it began, in the silence of forests that no longer stand. The skyscraper-tall trees have fallen, the air has thinned, and the giants are gone. But in stone, in fragments of armor, and in the rhythm of trackways pressed into ancient mud, Pulmonoscorpius still walks. Its legacy is not bones, but echoes. Every modern scorpion that raises a stinger is a memory carried forward, a gesture as old as the forests themselves. When we flinch at the smallest crawler in our world today, it is because some part of us remembers when they were rulers. So we close this chapter not with an ending, but with a reminder. The past was stranger, darker, and more alive with possibility than we often dare imagine. And the future, like the Carboniferous once was, may hold giants of its own, shaped by air, by climate, by chance. Pulmonoscorpius, the lung scorpion, the armored monarch of forests taller than skyscrapers, fades into shadow, but its lesson lingers. Scale is fragile, fear is eternal, and evolution is never finished. This is ancient beast behavior, and this was the story of the scorpions that once ruled the earth. And so the forest falls silent, the echo of armored giants fading into the distance. But if you've walked with me this far through the shadows of deep time, don't let the journey end here. There are more creatures waiting, more forgotten rulers buried in stone, and more secrets whispered by the earth itself. If this story of Pulmonoscorpius stirred your imagination, then let it be just the beginning. Hit the like button, share this tale with those who love mysteries as much as you do, and subscribe to join me again. Because here, in Ancient Beast Behavior, every chapter is another step into a world stranger than fiction and darker than myth. Stay curious, stay watchful, and remember, the past is never truly gone. It only waits to be rediscovered.